You'd think that the very lore-powerful main character of Genshin would actually be good, but no. They are arguably this game's only 3-star tier 5-star, so today I wanted to go over each of the Traveller's elements before we get the Pyro Traveller to evaluate whether they truly suck, or if they have any redeeming qualities whatsoever. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Right, so starting off with Anemo Traveller, here's the thing. Later on in the game, you're able to claim a free C0 Lynette. Even she ends up being a better free-to-play Anemo than them. Honestly, it's not like Anemo Traveller does anything particularly egregious, it's more so that literally any other Anemo can complete their job better. Their grouping is a bit awkward, sending enemies away with their Bursts Anemo Tornado, and the skill grouping really isn't anything to write home about. There is something unique that this variant of Traveller can do at C6, which is free. The ability to reduce the Anemo res of anybody that gets hit by their tornado by 20%. That's actually a neat ability which can be utilized in Anemo DPS teams. However, you'll often find that this singular ability isn't enough to allow this form of Traveller to hold their ground completely. Zhongli's 20% universal res shred can cover the same ground with much more practicality. Though I suppose the main deal here is that Traveller would be a free-to-play choice. There is one very specific function for Anemo Traveller, otherwise you're pretty much never going to be using this variant once you pick up some better Anemo options. But to be fair, certainly not the worst that the Traveller has to offer. Geo looks somewhat practical on paper, but ends up having very minimal applications, especially with 4-piece Intercity Kachina being a free, highly viable option now. Let's break this down. A Geo construct in their skill which has the application of being able to proxy Zero Chiori efficiently, while also being used to build wieners. The latter use case is very important. Then a Burst Shockwave which sends out a whole lot of rocks. Cool beans. So an undertuned Geo sub DPS. The main little bit of extra value that you can yield out of this variant is within the C1, which can give whoever stands inside of Traveller's Burst Rock Field 10% more crit rate. If you seriously want to cope, sure, use them as a Navia teammate so that our nukes have a higher chance of critting, or if a C0 Chiori to form a free-to-play friendly double Geo core, but my question to all of you in such a case is this: why are you not just using 4-piece Intercity Kachina? She can do all of those things except the crit rate buffing down at level freaking 20, all while being able to proc 40% team-wide damage bonus. Don't get me wrong, 10% rate is pretty good honestly, but you'll find Kachina to be much more practical. The only other major use there is for Geo Traveller outside of wienering would be the Microwave team. However, in a day and age where we have Chiori and Shilin and double Geo cores, there's no real reason to waste your time with this, unless you want to have some goofy fun with a ridiculous combo. To be honest, Geo Traveller was kinda cooked before Kachina as well, because R5 TDDS Ningguang is a thing. So while this is indeed not the worst form of Traveller whatsoever, in fact it seems pretty serviceable to me, there's quite literally no reason to use this over currently existing options. Electro Traveller is definitely one of the more pathetic ones. Really, good luck trying to make this work. Like, what team would you ever use this version of Traveller in? The whole gimmick here is that you'll get a huge energy supply from them. However, you'd rather use a more team-specific battery which benefits that specific team some more. For example, using Rosaria on a Favlance is going to be much better for an Ayaka Freeze team as opposed to using Electro Traveller. I think the interesting thing about E-Traveller, to be specific, is that it's just kind of forgotten. It's not even like people always point to this character to go, oh, look at how bad Electro Traveller is. Nope. This unit has just been completely overshadowed by everybody else in every single way possible, which is a strange albeit interesting observation to make. The kick concept isn't even all that bad. A designated off-field character whose only purpose is to battery and do that batterying super freaking well isn't bad in of itself, but as I said earlier, that batterying has to be some of the most quality stuff in the world to compete with more team-specific batteries. This is worse than Anemo and Geo Traveller in my opinion. However, there is indeed a Traveller which is worse than this, but we'll get onto that soon. Until then, we have to talk about the only good Traveller variant that we actually have. This is the only one that people are realistically going to be using these days when team building, especially when you consider that Traveller is as free-to-play friendly gets, considering that they're the main character. So right from the get-go, once you start the game, you can sprint all the way to Sumeri to unlock Dendro so that you can Hyperbloom and aggravate your way through the entire game. It's pretty silly doing that since you can very clearly tell that the 1.0 content wasn't balanced with Dendro in mind. Here's the thing, the main thing that DMC does is apply Dendro. However, that's all they have to do in order to have any semblance of value. If you don't have Nahida, then DMC is a pretty neat option for most of your Dendro-based teams. Sure, they'll be nowhere near as good as using Nahida, but they'll act as a more than suitable alternative. So even if we do have much better 4-star Dendro options these days, especially because the reactions are a lot more discovered, if you will, DMC is a very realistic free-to-play option even in this day and age. It's the best Traveller by far, however, the bar isn't very high. Even so, it's not just the best one only because the other lot sucks. No, it does have its own merit too. The Dendro application is pretty solid, which is literally all this Traveller variant had to do in order to be viable. We all know that the different kits are supposed to be microcosms of what the Archon or Dragon Sovereign will end up doing. Nahida applies an absurd amount of Dendro, whereas DMC applies a good amount of it. Good is still pretty, well, good. Now to discuss the absolute clown, Hydro Traveller. There is genuinely no use for this thing. Actual 2-star unit. Hoyoverse is fully aware that Hydro is the best element in the game, so they wanted to avoid giving out a super broken unit for completely zero cost whatsoever. Sure, DMC was good, but there was the handicap of being limited to specifically Dendro in place to prevent things from getting a little too crazy. Plus, DMC just applies Dendro. There's no crazy huge buffs happening within that kit. We're probably never gonna get a Traveller form that beats DMC. However, Hoyo went way too far in trying to prevent HMC from being good. Like, holy guacamole, you all burned the food. The mission statement was to make the unit decent at best, not utterly unusable. Okay, fine. I understand that designing this kit was pretty awkward. No spoilers, but you could agree that Neuvillette is the most important character in all of Fontaine after completing the quest. So even though Farina is treated like an Archon in all of the marketing, you can pretty clearly see that Hydro Traveller was supposed to be geared more towards Neuvillette. After all, HMC generates source water droplets. Our beloved Lady Farina has absolutely nothing to do with those, whereas Mr. Settle Down enjoys utilizing those big blue balls. First the Geo balls, now the blue balls. Traveller, I have a question for you. If quizzes are quizzical, then what are tests? Anyways, very insightful, I know. So HMC was destined to be pretty bad from the beginning. Hoyo had to make sure that this wouldn't become some insane hydro-applying fiend, while not over-tuning a free unit too much as they generally like to use the Traveller as a way to incentivize people to pull on banners. Honkai Stereo players are probably getting whiplash right now, because their HMC is actually very good. Shout yourselves out down below. Genshin's HMC ends up being super useless, because Neuvillette sustains enough blue balls on his own. More are welcome, sure, but you can't justify sacrificing a Draconic Glory stack over HMC's meager balls generation, and that's another weird thing. Why did they try to make HMC a Nuvi support when Draconic Glories was obviously gonna be in the way? It makes sense to ignore a stack of Farina, as you absolutely get your value's worth, but with HMC, what was the freaking goal here? It felt like Hoyo was cooked ideas-wise from the very beginning. I think an added little thing that makes this all even funnier is the freaking lame animations. At least with the Geo one, for example, you can feel some strength when popping out those pairs of quizzicals. But with HMC, this water gun has to be one of the weakest abilities I've ever seen in my life. Dude, this would tickle me at best, and I am not exactly the pinnacle of strength. How is this meant to harm monsters whatsoever? None of that is really relevant to their meta position. I just find the lameness of this water gun to be most amusing. 0 damage, 0 purpose in the meta, 0 viability. I didn't think that they would ever make a Traveller worse than the Electro form, but here we are, I guess. Hilariously disappointing kit. Hoyo truly burned the place down when they thought of this as a kit idea. So, should we get our hopes up for the Pyro MC? Nope, not at all. Dendro was a super unique circumstance in which the entire element was balanced around low-cost play, so simply applying a good enough amount of that element was enough. They'll probably end up with some goofy Night Soul-based mechanics, otherwise I think that releasing Pyro Traveller so late was a bit of a miss. They've always been used as a tease for the Archon's abilities, but now that this isn't going to be the case, who will care as to what they even do? It's obviously going to be way worse than Mawika. I would like to see if Traveller gains a unique traveling mechanic though. I doubt it, but it'd actually be pretty befitting of the Traveller. I expect them to be on the same level as like Geo Traveller. Not really good, not completely and utterly garbage, but not horrendously unusable like Hydro MC either. Just please give them some decent animations, because what is this? Traveller is always doomed to be a pretty bad unit. Their kits exist to incentivize you to pull for other units. I think it's pretty sad that they're not that good, because this is literally the MC. Some 5-star animations would be warranted at the very least. I do think that they should at least try to make the Traveller on the same level as an average 4-star, not the unusable 2 to 3-star tier kits that they usually put out for them. So honestly, yep, the Traveller does indeed suck. We all know why Hoyo makes them so bad, and low-cost Dendro teams are their only redeeming quality. Plus, for those of you who are not yet in the know, I've recently opened a ZZZ second channel. Go ahead and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. Hopefully this video was able to tell you why the Traveller sucks. This has been Juice, signing out, and here's hoping that the Cryo Traveller gives us another form of balls to work with.